All right, in this video, we'll take a look at Box Shadow, the CSS Box Shadow property. So I have a very simple document here with 3 divs. They all share a simple class of box that's giving them the width and the height and the background color. And then they have their individual classes, box 1, 2, and 3. And I have a simple background color, and I'm spreading these out with Flexbox. So now let's get into the shadows. So we looked at text shadow before, but CSS has a property called Box Shadow, and Box Shadow takes 5 values. So the first value is the horizontal offset, so let's say 12 pixels. Second value is the vertical offset. Again, I'll set that to 12 pixels. Then we have the blur radius. We saw that before, so I'll make this 6 pixels. Then we have something called the spread radius, which is optional, so you don't need to include it. So I'll just include it here just to see what happens. You can already see what's going on with the shadow. So 6 pixels out is giving me the width of the shadow there, but it's not starting until 6 pixels where it's blurring. So that's the spread radius. And then the last value would be the color. Like we saw before, you can either use RGB, RGBA, HSL, or a hex value. So I'll use RGBA here again, 000, and then maybe 0.5, and that gives it that look. So that's Box Shadow for that one. Now there is another way that you can do this where you can invert the shadow, and that is an Inset shadow. So again, for number 2, I'm going to say Box Shadow. And you don't have to put values for X or Y depending on, like, let's say, for example, I don't want to shift the values for X or Y. I don't want them to shift at all. And I just want the blur radius. So let's say I do a blur radius of 12 pixels. You can already see what that looks like. If you wanted to add a spread value, you can do that as well. And you can see that it's not coming out. But one thing that you can also add is a value at the beginning, which is called Inset. And Inset will make the shadow go inside the box rather than outside the box. So let me just increase this to make it look a little bit more, give it more appearance. And so that the shadow is inside the box rather than outside the box. So now let's say that I do 2 pixels, 2 pixels. All right, so it's going to change that appearance. Or if you wanted to do the opposite, you can use negative values to shift the shadow in the opposite direction. And again, with the last value, you can use an RGBA. And let's say I put 0.6. Right, so that will soften that up. So that's an Inset shadow. And then for this last one, if you want to say Box Shadow, I don't want to do an Inset again, but this time I'm just going to use the 3 values. So I'm going to use, let's say, 20 pixels, 20 pixels, and then for the blur, I'll do a high value of 20 pixels. You can see what that looks like. And then we'll give it a color, 0.3, just to make that a little bit subtle. And then if you don't want it to slide it over that much, maybe you just decrease this by a shorter amount. And so that gives you that shadow. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with shadows too in terms of effects and colors. And again, shadows like this, you want to use sparingly. You don't want to use them all over the place. So just bear that in mind. But that is the CSS Box Shadow property.